Yeehaw, hello, and howdy. Thank you for joining us on the CannonStats Podcast, the weekly Arsenal Analytics podcast. I am Scott Willis, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Adam Bogey. Adam, how you doing?
Hey Scott, I'm good. I'm ready for some real life club football to finally happen again for what feels like the first time in forever.
I know, it sucks that we have another one of these coming in 4 weeks. We're just going to squeeze in, and we're going to be back to another 2 weeks of nothing.
Yes, especially when even honestly when we were in the Europa League last season, I even missed those midweek games, even as catastrophic as they proved to be to our. I love watching club. I think I just really prefer club football to international. I said that last week, but especially when Arsenal have some games, just I miss it. So I'm happy that we get them
Absolutely.
back this Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a controversial statement by any stretch of the imagination.
Probably not.
I mean, I think everybody loves the big tournaments and those kinds of things because it's a fun way to do it. Gets you a little different, but it's just I think the quality of the games is just so different.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of time that the international players and coaches can get together and form any sort of connections just really hampers, I think, things, especially in the modern game.
Yeah, it's like no hate intended at some of these other leagues, but it kind of feels like you're watching like Serie A type of football where it's slower, less intense a lot of the time. So when you get like the really big games, I feel like it kind of kicks up. But I'll always remember Euro 2021 Granit Xhaka just like being one of the best players at that tournament, and this was before he had like really redeemed himself in Arsenal fans' eyes. But his ability to just like ping passes is kind of like a deeper playmaker. Just suits that style so well. Which is why in Italy you don't see a lot of like super athletic number sixes. You see a lot of those guys like deep lying playmakers. So I just feel like it's I don't know. I have so much fun with the Premier League. Even kind of like the scrub teams playing each other. Just it
Mm-hmm.
tends to be action packed and exciting, and obviously implications for your own club always helps. So love it.
Exactly. So I think that gives us a good segue into the main topic that I think everybody is worried about. So there was a report that came out about Bukayo Saka and him nursing/carrying an Achilles injury. It seems like Mikel was asked about it today in his press conference, and his report is he's fine. He trained normally today, so nothing to report there. Every player has pains and issues. That's normal in elite sports, but nothing to worry about. I think that kind of assuages my fears. I
Yeah.
think that this is pretty normal.
Yeah. I mean, I would be lying if I said I had anything more than like oh crap, this is going to be like what everybody wants to talk about type of reaction when I read that article. I mean, even
Yeah.
even the language in the article is a little ambiguous. Like it is believed, I think, is thrown in after he has an Achilles injury.
Actually, yeah, all the hedges, right, thrown in there.
Yes, yes. So I don't know. I guess I look at like the real, not to overuse the word data, but the real data here, which was that he had just played a full game, was on the
Mm-hmm.
bench for the second game, and came in, and just kind of felt like, it's probably just kind of the little bumps and bruises you get throughout the course of the season. Because if it were, as we've seen with Emile Smith Rowe, Thomas Partey, numerous others, if it's something that's going to like actually hamper the performance, Arsenal they're not going to like risk. Saliba would be another great example. They're not going to risk long term damage, especially to like the face of the club, by
Yeah.
putting him out there on an injury that he could exacerbate like really dramatically. So yeah, it felt like maybe Arsenal fans drive a lot of clicks.
Yeah. Well, and we just saw what happened with Aaron Rodgers too. So, to me, that also made me become even more nervous. Right? We just saw, if you're not familiar with American football, but so on the Monday night game,
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers of the New York Jets played, or was it his fifth snap, and then his Achilles went snap.
Yes.
On that play, and it was pretty gross and disgusting to see that replayed over and over again. So
Yeah, you
that in
definitely saw
combination
it
with
kind of ping,
Saka,
didn't you? Yeah.
yeah,
If you're not an NFL fan, it would be like if if Declan Rice got an Achilles rupture 10 minutes into this season, and he was like largely the reason for hope among that fan base. Obviously, like one of the best players historically in his position. So yeah, it's like Timber, but even worse, basically.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think speaking of Timber, I think we're all very sensitive right now. You know, we already had kind of a razor thin margin for error if we want to achieve really lofty goals this season, and we were looking at a situation where we had somebody who was really going to help, and that person went down very quickly, and now we're afraid it's going to keep happening. We had kind of compound injuries last season too, so I don't know. I think this is just it's a sore subject, no pun intended, for
Hmm.
Arsenal fans. We've had a rough history with injuries derailing title charges, and shortening careers and changing players for the worse. But I think I wrote in my kind of like free column for the week that to me it feels kind of like worrying about Saka specifically, but it applies to everybody. It feels a little bit like having an older person you love in your life and worrying about them dying. Like at some
Hmm.
point, your fears are probably going to be realized, right? But that's not necessarily because you're not doing anything to prevent it or forestall that future from happening. It's kind of a cost of doing business for that type of person.
Exactly.
And it's a cost like show me professional athletes who haven't had big injuries over the course of their career. It's a very small minority, I promise you.
Yeah, it's one of those. It becomes a certainty the longer you play that eventually it's going to catch up with you and happen. Like it may not be something that takes you out for a year or something like that, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly some 6 to 8 weeks. To me like that's where you start to get like that's a major injury
Yeah.
where you're gone for more than a couple months.
Yeah, I
And
would
yeah,
say,
like
yeah,
the yeah.
8 weeks is a pretty solid one. Like, I don't know that I would characterize what we're seeing with Party right now as a major injury, but Timber obviously is. Kevin De Bruyne right now is kind of like on the fence for me if that's a major injury because he'll be back around like American Thanksgiving, November. So Canadian subscribers, please note that I said American Thanksgiving, out of respect for your October Thanksgiving. Yeah, so it's
Different harvest time in Canada.
yeah.
Well, I mean, you're practically in Canada where you
I
are.
am I am I'm like probably a solid 5 hour drive from Canada, so got to get
You're
my
probably more
passport ready.
north than half the population of Canada.
Yeah, what was that? Yeah, I just it's something we're gonna worry about forever and ever and ever, and I guess the kind of the underlying point that I was trying to make when I wrote that whole piece was that it's very normal. It makes perfect sense to worry that Bukayo Saka or William Saliba or Martin Odegaard or one of the best players on the team is going to pick up an injury and miss a lot of time, and
Hmm.
Arsenal won't be as good as a result. But that is also just kind of the way the world works. Liverpool was one of my counter examples. They had really good injury luck for that stretch of 2 years where they won the Premier League and the Champions League. And mysteriously, they dropped 30 points season number 3 of that sample. What happened? Somebody tore their ACL. Like, yes, you're going to be a lot worse when Virgil van Dijk goes down. It's not their fault that they didn't have, some amazing backup. And I actually think that they actually had pretty decent defensive depth that season. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't go like, oh, Joe Gomez and Joel Matip, like those are not good backup center backs at that point in time. So, you know,
Yeah, so I think the other thing that was interesting from your post is what Saka is doing out of the ordinary
mhm,
for other players that I think that we would kind of put in the same caliber of like the team like absolutely depends on them to be kind of like the talisman figure.
mhm. Yeah, no, that's so when we have these discussions specifically about Arsenal players, and I do this with transfers too, just you really need to like weigh it against what is happening in parallel situations, whether that's similar size clubs, similar financially capable clubs selling similar stage of life players, or in this case, what are similar size like big clubs who are in Europe, specifically the Champions League, like what kind of minutes loads are they putting on their players? And when you put Saka up against some of the other guys who are supposed to be like superstars, it's just not it's not exceptional, I would say.
Hmm.
I know it feels like he's always playing, but I imagine the past couple of seasons, Real Madrid fans must feel the same about Vinicius, who's only about
Yeah.
10 months older than Saka. Last season, he played 800 more minutes than Saka. The season before, he played 900 more minutes than Saka. So that's 10 games. That's a lot more football. And I know that they went deep in the Champions League, but I mean, had they,
And I think Arsenal would hope that we do that again
they
this year,
would,
right? So I think the expectation is that we will put those extra games onto him.
And if they only lasted like a couple rounds less, I mean, you're talking about taking 2 games, 3 games, 4 games off of his plate. That's still not reducing the deficit here. Manchester City, as I call them in the column, I call them the patron saints of rotation in many fans' eyes.
Yes.
They threw Rodri out there for nearly 4,500 minutes last season. And this is after spending, what was it, 50 million plus on his backup? So
Yeah.
I know that that's been a flop, but I don't think that they would have willingly rotated him out anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, you might have seen a bit more, maybe at the end of game type of things. Like, Calvin Phillips was like really like the only significant injury that I think that I really recall for Manchester City last year, where he spent some of that time on the bench. I think that's something that is a little bit surprising too, is just how I think the luck Manchester City had with their injuries, because people, like to say that they rotate a lot, but I think people kind of overestimate the actual size of the squad that they have. I think this is something that Tim Stillman said on the Arsenal Vision podcast the other day, was that they have a very similar size squad, but in a lot of the key positions, the difference between, the starter and the guy who's coming in is small. So it doesn't feel like there's a lot of, when they rotate, it doesn't feel like somebody's being dropped or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you think Arsenal are getting to that point with some of the players? Because there's certain players that we have that are irreplaceable.
Yes.
But I feel like we're building towards something like that.
Yeah, and I do think that City have some players who are irreplaceable, more or less.
Yep.
We saw them last season, and in my opinion, personally, I think that they played worse without Kevin De Bruyne. There were games where he didn't start; he was rotated out, and in the first half, they would be just kind of dead in terms of attack. They would put up nothing, and then they'd bring De Bruyne on for the second half, and that's when they would win the game. Obviously Erling Haaland, everybody loves Julian Alvarez. He's, nominated for all these awards, Ballon d'Or and everything like that. But I think if you swapped him in for Haaland for an entire season, the quality at number 9 would go way down. De Bruyne,
that's an interesting
Rodri.
question, because I mean, I think that Alvarez kind of reminds me a bit of Jesus in that he's more of a complete all-around player versus Haaland. So I think that they could probably adjust the way they played some, but they cannot play the exact same way that they're playing with Haaland, who is a guy that he's a very low touch, huge impact player.
Yep.
Where Alvarez is a lot more of a player that touches the ball more, but is going to have more of a rounded impact in the game.
Yeah, and I mean, it's that kind of is a good segue into the point I was going to kind of eventually transition to, which is that I think Arsenal have reached City's, at least their ballpark, probably not quite there yet, in terms of like, one thing I think City has done really well, and I've spoken to this like over the past year, is they are not kind of like what the typical fan might imagine in terms of having depth at every position. Because I think you think starter is A, backup is B, then you go to this other position, starter is C, backup is D. But what they have is they have guys like Bernardo Silva, who is going to start on the right wing some games. He's going to start as more of an attacking midfielder some games. As we all know, he's going to start at left back in weird situations. They've got guys like Ake and Akanji on the back line where they are going to move around. They've got guys like John Stones, who can be considered a center back, he can be a DM. Kevin De Bruyne, who knows what his position technically is. And now that he's out with an injury, the backup striker is the guy who takes his spot in the side, and they go to like more of a 4-2-3-1. So I think Arsenal are getting into that territory where, say like Bukayo Saka did go down with an injury just for a game or two or however long, you might see some less of more of a 1-for-1 and more of like a shift in the tactics, where you might put Jesus wide, you might put Kai Havertz out there, you might put Vieira out there, and like the rotations and the kind of the relationships will change. So we've definitely seen that across the back so far this season. And, I would expect probably a lot more to come too.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes into what I wrote about today, where I think we're going to learn a lot about the plan for Arsenal in the coming, what is it, like 4 weeks?
Yeah.
Or it's 22 days before the next international break, where we have 7 matches inside of that period. And I think this isn't going to necessarily make or break the season, but I think this it could potentially derail some of the goals of the season if things go absolutely bad. But I think this is going to tell us a lot about how we're going to address being able to have the Champions League. And I'm really interested to see how much Mikel Arteta rotates. So I know we talked a little bit about this last week, but are you thinking that we're going to see a fair amount of rotation between the Premier League and the Champions League, especially the group stages here?
I think with Arteta, I kind of want to see the first game before I make a really strong statement on that.
That's true.
You
You
know,
never know with him.
he hasn't always been super rotation heavy, particularly like I think most people expect a solid amount of rotation when the games are 4 days apart, 3 days apart, but sometimes he throws out like a pretty similar 11.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were definitely times in the group stage last season where City would play a relatively easy Champions League game followed by the Premier League game within those 3 or 4 days, and the lineups would be almost identical. So I wouldn't be completely stunned to see like a total of 3 or 4 changes from Everton to PSV to Tottenham. I think Tottenham will obviously have the best 11 out there, and I do expect that for Everton too. So I don't exactly expect like, you know, Nketiah and Reece Nelson and Smith Rowe starting against PSV in Arsenal's first Champions League game in 6 years, 7 years. So
Yeah.
I would expect, you know, maybe you see kind of a couple of those little tweaks like a Tomiyasu getting a start for Zinchenko.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's a chance for Vieira to start over Havertz or something like that. Maybe a midfield kind of tweak. Jorginho gets a chance to play, something like that. But I think we might see a little bit more rotation as the season goes on more, and there's a little bit more wear down for the
Mm-hmm.
players.
Yeah, I think my baseline expectation is somewhere in like the 2 to 3 range for the outfield players.
Yeah.
I think, maybe for some of the tougher games, you might see 1 or 2 for maybe, an easier game, maybe 3. It's hard to really imagine beyond 3
Mm-hmm.
changes because I think we still want to use this as an opportunity to build, the fluency in the squad
Yeah.
because I think there's still just some slight lacking in the final execution. And I think that's, the final third, that's the hardest part of executing, and you need to just kind of play together to, I think, get on the same page. So I'm a little bit reluctant to see a lot of like wholesale changes. I think maybe for the League Cup you might see more wholesale changes, but for the actual Champions League, I think it's at max 3 players on the outfield. Like we might see, Araya come in, but to me, like I don't really count that necessarily as a change.
Yeah.
I'm more focused on the outfield players.
Not dramatic anyway. I think that you're probably right, and I've kind of become more in tune with this whole concept of like some players being a change that comes in a pair. So
Yeah.
maybe Zinchenko. I mean, we don't have Thomas Partey to be the inverted right back, so maybe that won't happen this time around. But like the idea that Zinchenko and Gabriel were a pairing, and if there's no Zinchenko because Thomas Partey's at right back, then Gabriel might not even start at all. I guess I wouldn't be shocked to see like the guys who are just outside the 11 getting in. Maybe you pull Martinelli and let Trossard play. Maybe he
Mm-hmm.
even plays at 9, but I would probably expect most of the starters for sure, especially in the early going until Arsenal, touch wood, are a few points up on the group.
Yeah.
Having PSV in the first game, I think, is a good way to start. Then I think they're in France after that. Yeah, that'll be in the beginning of October, and then going to Sevilla, I think might be the toughest game on the schedule. That'll be at the end of October. So probably pretty strong through those 3 games at least.
Yeah, and I think that exactly it, right? Because like we cannot throw away these games with a rotation because that would absolutely derail the thought behind like why did we get back in the Champions League just to rotate to throw it away. It's the same thing with I think it's a Premier League too, right? There's a 2 massive high leverage matches I think coming up. So obviously the North London Derby is always going to be something that everybody has circled on their calendars for Sims. They're important. But then at the very end of this run is the Manchester City match. And I think that's the one that everybody's going to be targeting as the one where we really need to be able to kind of get, a marker down to be able to do it. I look at this and think 9 points is kind of like the minimum expectation, I think, for the 4 matches that we have. Maybe you can drop points somewhere along the way, but 9 points is kind of my minimum for it being good enough.
That's in the Premier League between now and the next break. So
exactly.
That's Manchester City home, at Bournemouth, North London Derby, and then at Goodison Park this weekend.
Everton. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? After the Community Shield, I think kind of on balance, if you look at the Community Shield, you'd say, well, technically, did Arsenal really deserve to win? Maybe that would have ended up more of a draw in the regular season. So
yeah, I think a draw would have been perfectly fair in that match, which what it ended at regular time, which I think was on balance probably fairish.
Right. So I think I think you could hope for. I think let me put it this way. I think it's more reasonable to expect Arsenal maybe to be able to take some points off of City in this game, just based off of like the status of the squads and the schedule and everything. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely hoping for getting close to 10, if not the full 12. I mean, I'm always hoping for the full 12, but I would definitely be pushing for minimum of like 7 or 8.
Yeah. I mean, if it's less than 7, something probably went really wrong. I think when I looked at it, it was just under 8 expected points.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can't get 8 expected points from this. Well, I guess you could, right? You could get 2 wins and 2 draws.
Yeah, you could.
From there, so you could get 8 points here. But I think that 8 points would be great. 9 points is kind of like really where I'd like to be, even if that's 3 wins and a loss along the way.
Preferably not a loss. That
should get us. Yeah. But I mean, although if we come back and do it with a City win, I think we'll feel a lot better about the 4 runs.
That's true.
Or the 4, although that would definitely make Spurs fans feel very optimistic about their team, which is already kind of growing out of proportion, I think, to the early results.
I would like to snuff that out as soon as possible. So if they haven't gotten there already by the time that game kicks off, I would love for that to be the day that the title challenge takes a major hit. So we'll see how that one goes. I think they've just got Sheffield this weekend, so that's not too demanding.
No, the hype train is probably going to bounce back up, further, being able to see them, go up against a relatively easy match.
Yeah, they haven't looked good.
This one.
Sheffield United has not looked good, so.
No, they have not been. Has any of the the teams that have been promoted? They've all looked pretty bad. Has that surprised you at all?
To be honest, no.
I've been a little bit disappointed with Burnley. I thought they would look a little bit better, but they only have 3 matches played.
Yeah,
like Luton, because they had I think that would have changed maybe some of the opinions if they'd gotten a result there.
I mean, they're kind of an interesting one because I think they were riding a lot of like love for Vincent Kompany, love for like this progressive style of like, we're not going to come into the Premier League and park the bus type of football. Mm-hmm. They had, I think that they had an attractive window on paper. I certainly rated it well. But I think, like a good example of somebody who's come up and played more expansive football and been pretty successful would be Fulham in recent memory. And Fulham to me had more like leadership and experience in that side. You get guys like Tim Ream, Bernd Leno as your keeper. And Burnley has kind of gone like the complete opposite direction where James Trafford is the keeper. And both of their defenders are in like their early 20s, and most of their team is just very young. So if it's going to happen at all, it's going to take a while. But I think I picked them to be like 16th or 17th, so it's not a huge surprise for me.
Yeah, so I pulled this morning the schedule or the strength of schedule adjusted metrics, and all 3 promoted teams are at that bottom left corner in the bad stuff. Sheffield, by far the worst, then Luton, and then Burnley, right there with Everton and Fulham in that same group. So I don't know. For this weekend, what's the lineup you're picking?
Yeah, I think I would go unchanged from Manchester United.
Okay, so even with Eddie up top,
I forgot about Eddie. I think I would go unchanged with that one change being putting Jesus back in. I think there's been some stuff going around that he's loved a game versus Everton in his career, so I would try to ride that. He missed both of our fixtures against them last season.
Yep.
I think I feel like the most common idea, so to speak, that I've seen is to throw Fabio in for Havertz.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that too.
Or
And I've seen the other one that I've seen fairly common is Tomiyasu coming in for Zinchenko, going with almost the four center back look.
yeah, and I've seen that one, and I've also seen Jorginho being the one to come in for Havertz and playing Rice and
Mhm.
Odegaard ahead of him. I guess I would just stick with Havertz though. Not only just for kind of like continuity and continuing to build the relationships as we go into the Premier League or the Champions League later in the week, but I think that the thing about Everton that really killed us at Goodison Park last season was I feel like we couldn't really play over or around that giant athletic midfield.
Yeah, where they stuck like five guys in the middle and really clogged things up.
And I think that having the combination, especially if Havertz and Jesus together, might give us kind of like, ironically facing Sean Dyche might give you kind of like a route one way to get through that. So, I think he's going to be so much more robust in winning the ball back when we do lose it. It's been probably his best quality. Other than, I mean, the
Hmm.
creative passing, you can't deny that it's been good. It's the numbers are all there. So I think I think this might be a good game for him specifically, where you look at like Fabio or ESR and you say they may just be a little too on the lightweight side for this
To me, it feels like a perfect like opportunity for either of them to maybe come on, at that 70-minute mark that we've been kind of coming in. Like I think that has worked well with them. A little bit more of the tired legs.
one. Mhm.
We've moved around the deep block a bunch, and hopefully it's with a lead that they come on and they're able to help kind of see us out.
Yeah, and I mean, just don't concede early.
Yeah,
I would love, they did successfully not concede early against United. I would love now for the next step to be don't concede first.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
we'll just
Don't
keep
let the
going
first
down
shot
that
on
road.
target go in.
Yeah, I would love to. I think if Arsenal can score first, it would be really huge for this game. I think that Beto has looked pretty good since coming into Everton, and he could potentially cause some trouble if they are a lot, or if they're able to like set him loose in some space running against Saliba and Gabriel. But I think DCL Calvert Lewin being kind of more of a question mark. They have
Yeah,
some.
so there was the report the Son Dice was saying you were talking about before we started recording, right? So he was a little coy with his availability,
Yeah,
but it looks like at a minimum off the bench, potentially able to start.
yeah. It seems like while he didn't say it like directly, he kind of pulled an Arteta style. It's he said he's managed to keep his fitness up, so he'll be coming back into the fold. So I think that means he's probably coming off the bench. Obviously, Dele Alli is not around, but I think the other significant one could be Michael Keane. He's not going to be ready for this game, and Jack Harrison won't be either. So, I think in some of the other previous games, they've gone with a little bit more of a green look on the wings. I think Lewis Dobbins started one game. I'm not sure that I had heard of him coming into this season. So
Hmm.
yeah, it feels like they're really going to try to do the same thing and just really clog the middle. So
What do you like? What do you mean, or like how have you interpreted the Everton performances so far? Because it's a kind of a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde so far, right? So they're
yeah,
in 18th place, 1 point, -6 goal difference. So like everything is pointing, at least on that side, towards a bad team.
bad.
But then you kind of look at some of the underlying numbers and they jump up quite a bit. Excluding penalties, they're at ninth in XG difference at an even game state. And this one surprised me quite a bit. They're fifth best when the game is 11 versus 11 and the score is tied. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of small sample size stuff here with 4 matches, relatively easy schedule.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I guess how worried are you about the performances not matching the actual results here, and maybe things come back to bite Arsenal.
Well, that was kind of one thing that I was gonna bring up was the schedule.
Hmm.
So especially on the output side, like attacking, a lot of their a lot of their output has come through two games. The beginning, Fulham, which they just got like completely footballed to lose that game
Yeah.
because yeah, I'm just looking at Football Ref, 2.7 to 1.5 in terms of XG.
Hmm.
If you look at that game, I think statistically it's like one of the highest performing like goals prevented performances we've ever seen
Yeah.
from Bernd Leno. Like he just stood on his head for that game and they lost 1-0. Sheffield United, they did the same thing. This was their fourth game. They doubled them on XG. Sheffield only had 1.2 XG, but again, it's kind of a smash and grab, and it's a draw.
And it took it was the Pickford own goal that was pretty ugly there for them to be able to get that second goal.
Yes.
I'm looking here too, like some of the stuff. So like the Wolves match too, like they get out early in the first half and like they just cannot convert their chances. It's the same story with the Fulham match where they had over 2 expected goals in the first half and just could not convert anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fulham get one chance kind of at the very end, and like they put it away to win that game 1-0. Like it's a very well. I mean, they absolutely just got dominated by Aston Villa. So hopefully that's the same way that this match goes.
Yeah, they got just really beat up by Aston Villa, and it was pretty similar against Wolves. Is more similar to like the Fulham game. I felt like where they had some chances that I'm looking at shots 15-11, 7-2 on target, but Jose Sa makes 7 saves.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like maybe that's something Arsenal could take advantage of, is the lack of clinicality at the top of the formation there. But I mean, Wolves, for all the really positive like vibes that they had after their performance against Manchester United, I'm not sure that they have really been matching that in the rest of the games. I remember tweeting during the second game of the season that now I feel better about picking Wolves to like get relegated because they really scared me in the first game. But I mean, they got it was actually relatively even on like expected metrics against Brighton, but they lost 4-1. They they basically played Everton even. They lost to Crystal Palace, who we've seen already, and I wasn't very impressed by. They've been without Michael Olise, everything else. So it's one of those ones where it's really hard to know who the real Everton are right now. I probably lean.
And I know we touched on this earlier, right? But so on my metrics, they have played the easiest schedule, so they by far not been challenged thus far.
But they have played their best games at home.
Mm-hmm.
So that obviously works against Arsenal here, and obviously it's kind of like one of the bigger boogeyman fixtures that the club has had the past few seasons. So
yes, it's 6 years without a win at Goodison Park,
and these have not been 6 especially good years in the history of Everton either. So that's a little deflating. I would love to exercise some demons in this one. I think just getting through the first 20 to 30 minutes without giving anything up on the counter, without any stupid mistakes at the back, and hopefully some sustained pressure, even if they don't necessarily score, but just sustaining some pressure on Pickford on the opposing goal, I think would just go a really long way to kind of like chasing away some of those ghosts.
Yeah. I mean, I went and I looked this up too. Like over the last 5 matches, it hasn't really been like unlucky for Arsenal. Like maybe it's a little bit slightly unlucky that there wasn't more draws or something else in there. But I think Everton has mostly outplayed Arsenal at Goodison Park. Yeah, combined score of 6-2 with the XG 6.4 to 4.3. So it's a little bit weird. It's certainly possible that weird things happen when you just have a small sample size like this, but this has been one of the weaker teams. So I was looking at this also. So since Mikel Arteta took over, Everton, the total 1.3 points per match is the 4th lowest of any teams that we've played so far. So number 1 is obviously Manchester City, where we have 0 points per match. Liverpool at 1, and then 3rd is Burnley, another bogey team at 1.2 points per match. So hopefully we can change both Everton and Burnley this season to get us back onto a better trajectory.
If we can't, I mean, the performance at the Emirates against Everton was great. I think that it was 4-0, and it was not an even game, but yeah, I mean, sample size is whatever. Like having watched those games at Goodison Park the past few seasons, I mean, they haven't like played up. Like they've sleepwalked through a lot of them. I remember, I think was it the season that I feel like it was the season where the changes came, like Emile Smith Rowe losing at Everton was like one of the last straws.
Yeah. I think that was like right after that too. Is like that's where was that where Aubameyang got dropped kind of after the Everton game, or it was right after, because it was like that happened like right at like December time, when things were starting to get real bleak with Arsenal.
So
because that was the Gray winner at the end, where he just like put one in the top corner, if I'm remembering right. Damari Gray. Was
I
that
think
who
you're
put it
right.
in the
Yeah.
top corner?
The
Yeah.
2021 matchup, we lost 2-1. It was pretty even on XG. I want to actually see the match report. I think you're right about that. And the season before that was pre like going to the Project Youth. Yeah, Damari Gray 80 plus 2 or 90 plus 2. Richarlison
Yep.
80th minute. So yeah, it was miserable. I think Odegaard might have scored from a free kick if I remember correctly in the first
Yeah, just
half.
looking at that one, yeah, the first half, Arsenal had 2 shots in that match. This is the December 6th, 2021. It was just an atrocious attacking day from Arsenal.
So I think that the good news is that Arsenal have come a long way since some of those performances. The bad news is, last season this was largely kind of the team that we see now, and that game was pretty ugly. I mean, we didn't even
Mm-hmm.
get a full goal expected in that match. So, I think weirdly Arteta's got like something to prove here against his former club. Like this is not Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp that he's managing against either. This was Sean Dyche for one away game, and I think like Frank Lampard for at least one.
No, I don't think we did. Did we get a Frank Lampard? Oh, not on the away games. I don't know if we did get a Frank Lampard. I'm gonna have to go check
Who preceded Frank
who it
Lampard
was.
in Everton? I
Was
forget.
it a Rafa Benitez match that we
Might have
had?
been.
Yeah, and then there was the Ancelotti Everton. I think we had for
I
one of the
forgot that he
games.
managed them for a season. Wow.
Right, like that is totally like out of character for where they're at now. Like they
Yeah.
were like, because yeah, Ancelotti and Arteta like came on, at the similar times, and yeah, the very divergent sense those kind of things have happened. Remember, they used to have James Rodriguez playing for Everton. Like, how crazy is that to like think now? They've fallen a long way.
Speaking of, yeah, international football not quite translating to club. Yeah. Well, I think it's not going to be. I don't think this is going to be the game where we get the free flowing football that a lot of fans are really looking for. But it's
I'd like to see a lot of control, though, right?
yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things that has been good for Arsenal, and I think I'd really like to see us just like strangle the match and not be susceptible to the counter.
Well, I think I feel pretty secure in saying that we've made one very big change that can really help us cope with midfields like this Doucouré, Onana, and Idrissa Gueye midfield, which
Mm-hmm.
is to bring in Declan Rice. So
Absolutely.
that's going to be a really huge deal because he's historically just been so much less like affected by adverse conditions like this. I mean, that's the great thing about being big and strong and fast is that you're big and strong and fast in every situation. So, last season we had Party in midfield and we had Odegaard and Xhaka with him, and still that just couldn't really cope with like the physicality and the pace of that midfield. So, I think having Declan in will be a big deal, and hopefully the size of Havertz, because I do expect his name is going to be on that team sheet at an hour
Mm-hmm.
before kickoff. So I don't know. It's a unique test to face, but I feel better
It's
about it
kind of
now.
a throwback to the old Premier League where you used to have more of these kind of matches, but it feels like that's something that a lot of the Premier League has moved away from
Mm-hmm.
as the money has trickled in and down the league.
Yeah,
So it's an interesting kind of change of pace for teams.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and hopefully, I mean, we all know what Sean Dyche loves to do to Arsenal players, just like kick the living hell out of them. So hopefully, no injury concerns to come out of this game from, because I know that some fans could not handle that right now. So
No, I think we'd all go into overdrive of worry if we had another injury, especially with the matches coming up.
yeah, well, I mean, the good news is that on Wednesday, the game against PSG will be almost polar opposite, particularly with no Ibrahim Sangare on that side anymore. They're much more expansive. It'll probably be more of like a wide open game, or at least they'll try, I think, to make it wide open, and I would expect to be able to control that as well. So hopefully we'll have a couple games with field tilt like 60-70% or more, a bunch of
Absolutely.
shots, and hopefully no dumb mistakes, and then you get 2 wins.
Yep. No, I think that'd be perfect. So the last little bit of news that's kind of percolating in the Arsenal ether is a potential contract extension for the captain, Martin Odegaard. I know Arteta was coy about that in his press conference today. not given anything away, which obviously I don't think he can with anything there. But how excited are you on a scale of 1 to 10 for a potential Martin Odegaard extension?
On 10. I, give him what Bukayo Saka got, and I think there's no problem with that at all. There seems to be every indication that ownership and management are willing to allow for organic wage growth, and there's very little argument against the concept of Odegaard getting paid more than he does now. You could, I'm sure whatever he'll sign will be reported as 300K, even if it's like base 180 with bonuses, for winning the Champions League and blah blah blah. Just like Saka, but at the end of the day, like these contracts, if they're performing really well, then they get more money, and who cares? Like then we're happy. Then we're making money as a club. So I think it's just been such a huge deal that not only in a matter of like 3 years has this squad been completely rebuilt with a new core. And no, not every transfer has worked, but the ones that have hit, once Odegaard and White sign, which also sounds very positive, they will have like signed and then extended every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you historically like if that's necessarily rare or not, but it does feel significant that nobody has pushed on for a bigger club or a greener pastures or something like that. The only real exceptions we've had to that are players who are basically already being forced out of the squad anyway because they've been upgraded on. So I think that's just a really good kind of piece of like real world feedback about the project, about the manager, about Edu and everyone else who's going to interact with the players and really sell the project. So feels really good. Just seems like a
No,
lot
but I
of
think
good news there.
yeah, and I think it's a good sign for where the players feel like the trajectory of the club is going.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is type of the age and the profile of you think about someone like Martin Odegaard. He's not like an academy player, so like I think there's a little less expectation that he might give a hometown discount for something like that. I mean, especially with what we've seen with some of our players who came in at a similar age or at this point of their career where maybe they have their sights set on moving to that next one. Maybe there's a little bit of the benefit of he's already been to like a Real Madrid
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't work out, and he's found I think a good home here. But you think about the age of a player when you want to be making that big commitment. I think he's like right in that perfect spot. So he's 24. He'll be 25 in December,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's the perfect age for I think you want to kind of give him that 5-year contract kind of a thing and like really kind of lock him up through the end of his peak. And even when you get to the end of it, if you can potentially sell or do something there, or make sure that I'd probably be very happy to just see that contract go all the way to the end, and I think everybody would be very very happy with a Martin Odegaard type deal that goes like that.
I would. I mean, we'll probably get to a point where these guys are 28 and 29 and people are saying we should be selling, but you can keep certain players like that around and just kind of allow them to kind of Xhaka their way out of the club or out of the lineup basically. Yeah, no, it's just I think it's been especially impressive because Arsenal have been for the last few years, for lack of a better term, a little bit more of a banter club
Mm-hmm.
than we would like. And I don't think that there's a single exception to the young core. So I would consider that Martinelli, Odegaard, Saka, probably Saliba, Gabriel, Ben White, Ramsdale. I think maybe Ramsdale is the only one of them who has not been like realistically or credibly
I
linked.
think you could throw Rice now into that mix now, like the
Yeah.
new Rice addition that we're adding to that foundation.
And the only reason I didn't is because he only joined in the summer. But
Yep.
they've all been, what I was saying is they've all been like credibly linked to like a really big club at some point. Odegaard with PSG, Gabriel with PSG and Juventus, Saka, everybody's worried about City grabbing him. They're watching him, allegedly Liverpool and Martinelli. So, no shortage of interest in those players, and they haven't Saliba, PSG. Nobody's head has been turned. So I think that's just
Mm-hmm.
super encouraging, especially for the ones where there was actually maybe some like some real doubt about whether they would sign that new contract, like Saliba. So it's pretty cool. It's something that we haven't gotten to experience very much lately, just like the Champions League. So
No, I think it's a very positive note to kind of wrap things up with. Yeah, I'm excited to get back into the swing of things. Hopefully, we have some better things to discuss after a nice big win away at Goodison Park to knock off that hoodoo that we have going there.
I would love that. Yeah, we'll come back for our next one after that and after PSV. Sorry, so we will have hopefully two good performances, two wins. Would love a Havertz goal and an assist or something like that. Something that is a little bit more tangible than some of the advanced analytics, because I know that
Yeah,
discussion is just not going to stop until he scores, or at least makes a nice assist. Like something like that has got to happen for some of these people to really start to appreciate what's happening there, and not be pushing so hard to move on. So
exactly. Yeah, hopefully build some momentum for the derby next week. Yeah, so we got Sunday, big match against Everton, and then after that the big North London derby to go through.
win them all.
All right, all right. Didn't do any housekeeping in the middle, so I'll do it here at the end. This show is supported by our much appreciated premium subscribers. If you do want to look into doing that, you get at least 5 additional articles per month. You'll have some additional premium podcasts to be able to listen to as well. And you'll also have our everlasting gratitude to support all the things that we do. If you can't or won't, a like and subscribe is always welcome to be able to do that. You can follow us all on social medias at CannonStats. Yeah. So Adam, hopefully we have a nice big weekend with a win.
Let's hope so. I'm looking forward to it. I just love watching the games. It's, we talked about this on the Gooners versus Cancer podcast, like the podcast marathon, whether it's less enjoyable. I know a lot of people asked whether it's less enjoyable to watch games, because our heads are so much in like the data clouds so much. But in the moment, like I'm just enjoying it. I'm especially when we're playing well. I guess maybe sometimes I'm not enjoying it, but let's hope for just like a fun. I just want an early lead and like something we can enjoy for 85 minutes. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll echo that. Thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you on the next one. Cheers, y'all.